I believe that if somebody if they accept surface level answers, it's because they don't know what they're actually trying to gather in information. And the whole point of the question is for you to get the right information. One of my favorite drills when I sold with Sales Sniper, when I sold with 7th Level, was around conversational flexibility. And we would re-ask questions to each other. So we might say, hey, what would success look like for you? And then we would ask it again and say something like, okay, and so for you, what would a win look like this year? And then we would just keep going back and forth and re-ask it different ways. So we would have flexibility. If I need to get past the first answer, I'm using simple questions. What do you mean by that? Tell me more about that, right? And these might seem obvious. However, you guys would be surprised how many reps just don't do it. They just take surface level answers and they go down to the next thing on the script. And like, I know that this might seem kind of basic for some of you guys if you're more advanced. I promise you, sometimes we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. The other piece with this is if you want to get beneath the surface, right, and not accept the first answer, it comes from having a curious intention, right? Operating from a place of curiosity. When I operate from a place of curiosity, I get way more compliance because I'm just genuinely interested. Not like some old school how to win friends and influence people with like fake compliments, but like, hey, I genuinely want to help and I'm trying to understand their situation. You guys, if you just have genuine curiosity, you're going to get people to open up way easier. It's kind of like the prospect's first answer is never their real answer. It's just the surface. And your job is to dig deeper, right? And if you don't know how to do that job, that would be like a plumber doesn't know how to clean a toilet, right? Like you got to learn how to do your job as a salesperson, a sales professional. Dirty money, Jordan Bell birds. Stacking penny stocks, I'm flipping these birds. I just flipped a birdie. Money so dirty. I've listened to thousands of sales calls and I can predict within the first 10 minutes if someone's going to close the deal or crash and burn. And today I'm going to show you the 4 most common, just fatal mistakes that kill 90% of sales conversations and more importantly, how to fix them, right? So stick around because mistake number 4 is the one that even experienced salespeople make without realizing it. What's up guys? Mason here. Before we dive in, if you're serious about improving your sales skills, your conversations, closing more deals, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because I share advanced sales strategies every week that you won't find anywhere else. Here's the thing. Most people think that they're having good sales conversations, but they're actually sabotaging themselves from the very beginning. And these 4 mistakes, I mean, I review calls all the time. I run multiple teams. They're so common. I see them in like almost every call I review. But once you understand them, you can start avoiding them and your close rate is going to skyrocket. And the cool thing about these are principles. These aren't things where you need to change your entire script so they can work for anybody. Now, the first fatal mistake is accepting the first answer. So let me ask you this. When someone says, you know, we're just fine or we're just looking, do you move on to your next question? If you do, you're leaving money on the table. So here's what's really happening. You're stopping after the first answer and just moving to the next question. You're accepting vague surface level answers without clarifying. And this comes from not knowing what you're looking for in a question, right? So I've got a rep, you know, I was reviewing some calls the other week and I noticed that he asked somebody basically what they were like hoping to get out of the call today, right at the top of the call. And they just gave like some vague, like I said, oh, we're just looking for some more info. And he just moved right on. When instead, if he would have been like, okay, when it comes to info, what is it that you're looking for specifically? Just gone one layer deeper, right? He had a chance to go past the first answer, but he just needed a little training, a little support. That's one example. But another situation is you actually know what you're looking for from a question. You ask it and you don't get the right answer. So here's how to fix it, guys. The ability is in 2 things. 1, being able to re-ask questions and 2, knowing what you're actually looking for from your questions. I believe that if somebody if they accept surface level answers, it's because they don't know what they're actually trying to gather in information. And the whole point of the question is for you to get the right information. One of my favorite drills when I sold with Sales Sniper, when I sold with 7th Level, was around conversational flexibility. And we would re-ask questions to each other. So we might say, hey, what would success look like for you? And then we would ask it again and say something like, okay, and so for you, what would a win look like this year? And then we would just keep going back and forth and re-ask it different ways. So we would have flexibility. If I need to get past the first answer, I'm using simple questions. What do you mean by that? Tell me more about that, right? And these might seem obvious. However, you guys would be surprised how many reps just don't do it. They just take surface level answers and they go down to the next thing on the script. And like, I know that this might seem kind of basic for some of you guys if you're more advanced. I promise you, sometimes we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. The other piece with this is if you want to get beneath the surface, right, and not accept the first answer, it comes from having a curious intention, right? Operating from a place of curiosity. When I operate from a place of curiosity, I get way more compliance because I'm just genuinely interested. Not like some old school how to win friends and influence people with like fake compliments, but like, hey, I genuinely want to help and I'm trying to understand their situation. You guys, if you just have genuine curiosity, you're going to get people to open up way easier. It's kind of like the prospect's first answer is never their real answer. It's just the surface. And your job is to dig deeper, right? And if you don't know how to do that job, that would be like a plumber who doesn't know how to clean a toilet, right? Like you got to learn how to do your job as a salesperson, a sales professional. Here's mistake number 2, and that is putting the focus on you. One of the questions when I review people's sales calls, I say, who are you putting the focus on? Who did that put the focus on? Where did that put the focus on? Because what we do with our questions is we control focus, right? And so one of the common things I see is reps will find a way to either put the focus on themselves, on the product. And this one is sneaky, right? Because it can feel like you're building rapport, but you're actually killing the sale, right? So here's what it looks like. Anytime prospect shares something, you immediately talk about yourself or how it relates to your program instead of asking up a follow-up question, that's a trap. Being overly buddy-buddy, relating on surface level topics like where they're from, sports, weather, that's a trap. Anytime there's like awkward silence, you break it and put the focus back on you to reduce the discomfort, that's a trap. Oversharing your life story without it relating back to them in a clear way, right? Bringing up features and benefits in the first 10 minutes, like covering the details of the entire program in the first 10 minutes, you're just putting the focus in the wrong place. In the very beginning of a sales conversation, it's literally moving the focus away from you and onto them as quickly as possible to pull sales pressure out of the conversation, to pull resistance out of the conversation and get people to open up. So what I want you to remember here is they don't care about you. They really don't. They care about themselves. They care about their problems. They care about their needs. They care about getting their wants met. So keep the conversation focused on them, their challenges, and their desired outcomes. All right, guys, mistake number 3 is staying in the comfort zone, staying in the safe zone. And this is the biggest irony of them all, because as a sales professional, your job is to help people get out of their comfort zone to make change, which is inherently uncomfortable. And the biggest irony is where most salespeople, they just get comfortable talking about easy stuff instead of the things that actually matter. And when you stay in your comfort zone, here's what it could look like, right? It could be avoiding emotional cues. When you hear words like frustrated, stressed, sad, like lower emotions, I watch a lot of people skim over that and they just are like, oh, let me move on to the next question. When I hear that, I'm like, oh, great. This is my opportunity to dig deeper, given that I know it's related to what we saw. I'd be like, well, sad, what do you mean by that? Or, hey, can we look at this together? Like, I'm going to probe and clarify into that, figure out the impact, how it affects them, how is it showing up in their life. I'm going to have them walk me through examples so that they actually relive that pain. Another example of staying in the comfort zone as a salesperson is never asking the tough qualifying questions. Like, how important is this for you to achieve XYZ? Are you committed to actually making this change? When we pitch someone without getting a gauge on their pain, without getting a gauge on their desire, without getting them to, verbalize their level of commitment, we're staying in the comfort zone. We're basically pitching and praying and hoping. It's like hopium. It's a dangerous drug, right? Like hoping that things change. Another one where I see of most common comfort zone for sales reps is just not asking about like a cost of an action around what happens if they let, especially for B2C, right? What happens if they let their current way of thinking, acting, and operating dictate their decisions and they stay on the same trajectory in their life, right? What would that look like? Very few people feel comfortable to ask these. However, it's a necessary question. And the final one that I would say is never asking why. Why-based questions. I had a rep who I took him from a 15% schedule to close to a 30% schedule to close month over month. The thing I would attribute that to specifically was him getting comfortable asking why-based questions. And when I asked him what his resistance was around asking why-based questions, it was that he felt like the answers were obvious. And I challenged him. I said, well, even if they are the questions for you or are they for them? Who are the questions for? I redirected his focus just like we were talking about earlier. And he realized questions are for them. Yes, it helps the sales rep, but more importantly, it helps the prospect get clear on what they want, what they need, what their problems are. And when he was not going to that why before, he was losing sales. He was only closing laydowns. And now I'm watching him close deals where these are people who didn't even want to come on to buy the product. And by the end of the call, they're like, yeah, no, this makes sense. We should do it. So this is a trap, right? The safe zone, the comfort zone, whatever you want to call it, it does feel comfortable, but comfortable does not close deals. Like you need to be willing to go where other salespeople won't go to give a prospect a world-class experience. Here's mistake number 4, rushing to solution mode, AKA pitching it way too early. And this is the one that kills even experienced salespeople, right? They think they're being helpful, but here's what it looks like. It's like pitching before, I would say, if you're selling high ticket, 4 minute 10 of the call. If you're pitching without getting deep buy-in on a why, like some level of commitment to change, that they're ready for change now, it's like pitching, it's a totally general pitch. Here's the issue with it. When you pitch too early, you have no context to connect back to. And what the pitch feels like is a pitch because it's not actually connected. Let me give you an example. I love using things like connecting phrases, right? To tie back to relevant pain. I'll give you guys a couple examples of those. One of them could be, because how you mentioned earlier, okay, yeah, well, this is going to be super helpful with the calls so that you can insert what they want so that you can. Okay, and what that means to you is 1, 2, 3. I can't use those connecting phrases well if we pitch too early because I don't have any ammo. I don't have any good mental notes to actually call back to. So whenever I pitched from stage earlier this year in Cabo and closed like 175K in a day with Andrew Cruzy, that connecting phrase was critical. Like when I was pitching one to many, it was like, what that means to you is, right? And that worked because I had the context of the weekend. I had been connecting with the participants. And yes, that's a one-to-many sales situation. It's a little bit different. And it worked because I had that context. So what I'm looking for is that you guys, it's the old doctor frame, right? And some of these things you've probably heard before. And like I said, sometimes we just need to be reminded that a doctor won't prescribe medicine before understanding what's wrong, and neither should you. As a sales professional, until we understand the problem, the pain, the need, the desire, the want, we don't just pitch because it makes us look salesy. So there you guys have it. Those are the 4 fatal mistakes that are killing your sales convos: accepting the first answer, putting the focus on you, staying in the comfort zone, and just rushing to solutions and pitches. So here's my challenge for you. Record your next 3 combos on Fathom and feel free to send me one. Like send it to me in the DMs. I'll actually review it for you. And I guarantee you'll catch yourself making at least 1 or 2 of these mistakes. And once you start to avoid them, you'll see an immediate improvement in your close rate, but more importantly, in the quality of your conversations. If this video helped you, go ahead and smash that like button. Let me know in the comments which mistake you catch yourself making the most often. If you want more advanced sales training like this, make sure you're subscribed with notifications because I've got some game-changing content coming your way this year. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
I've been getting dirty money, Jordan Belfort.